an attempt to block them from complying with congressional subpoenas. President Trump calling it another example of what he considers presidential harassment. But House Democrats say they are just performing their oversight duties.
Fox's Sean Lanchel, House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jerry Nadler says the president is trying to obstruct Congress.
Well, of course the White House is trying to obstruct oversight. They've said that. The president said he'll oppose all subpoenas. There's no question. The president has said there's been enough oversight, and he's going to oppose all subpoenas, not just in respect to the Mueller report, but in other areas, too.
Attorney General William Barr has been called to testify before the House Judiciary Committee later this week, but the Justice Department says it objects to a plan to have committee lawyers question Barr if he declines to appear. Nadler threatens to subpoena the Attorney General's testimony. Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein's delayed resignation has been resubmitted. He'll be leaving the Justice Department at the end of next week. He'd originally planned to exit when William Barr returned as Attorney General, but delayed at Barr's request to see the special counsel investigation to its conclusion. The deadly weekend collapse of a construction crane in Seattle may have been caused by workers disassembling it incorrectly. Pins that tied the sections of the mast together were apparently removed prematurely, according to a crane safety investigator who says if the pins were still in, the crane would not have fallen. 4 people died in that collapse. Fire and helicopter parts rained from the sky Monday in suburban Honolulu. 3 people were killed as a sightseeing helicopter burst into flames and crashed. The cause of that wreck is under investigation. This is Fox News.
The sky's the limit with Bank Pacific's secure MyCloud banking. You can access your account 24/7 with your smartphone, your computer, your iPad, or any other tablet. You can pay bills, set up alerts, check your balances, wire transfer money. It's never been easier. Enroll online or come on in and see one of our friendly staff. Digital Life, Digital Solutions. Bank Pacific.
Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Equal housing lender, member FDIC. Viva Bank Pacific.
GRMC's cardiology department treats most complex heart problems. In our catheterization lab, cardiologists use imaging equipment to treat clogged arteries that can cause heart attacks or heart failure. We perform balloon angioplasty, stenting, and other life-saving cardiac procedures. If you suffer from a heart condition, have your provider refer you to GRMC's cardiology clinic at 645-5500. GRMC, where patients are partners.
The FBI and federal prosecutors say they've stopped a possible terror attack in Southern California.
Target number 1 was supposed to be a white nationalist rally that was scheduled in Long Beach, south of Los Angeles. The FBI says the suspect, 26-year-old Mark Stephen Domingo, not only committed to the attack, but picked out the location of the rally where he wanted a bomb to be placed. And federal agents say Domingo went to home supply stores looking for the deadliest material. Investigators say last week Domingo delivered the nails to who he thought was a bomb builder. Then on Friday, Domingo was arrested after an undercover agent handed him a fully built but phony IED. Investigators say the suspect also wanted to attack the Santa Monica Pier during the crowded summer months to cause the highest number of casualties.
Fox's Trace Gallagher reports Domingo, a former soldier, wanted to avenge the attacks at mosques in New Zealand. A vigil held Monday near San Diego for the people shot at a Jewish synagogue on Saturday.
These acts of violence are intended to scare us. They are intended to terrorize us. Fear and intimidation will not silence our voice.
Michael Hopkins of Jewish Family Services in San Diego. Those shootings claimed the life of a 60-year-old woman, Lori Kay, who was buried Monday. 3 other people were wounded. A 19-year-old man has been charged with murder. 25-year-old Michael Cummins has been arrested and named as a suspect in 7 homicides Saturday night in rural Tennessee. The state's Bureau of Investigations Director David Roush explaining why some of the bodies weren't found until a day later.
The challenge, I think, that we mentioned the complexity of this scene and the need to take our time as we processed, and so that's the reason that it took longer to find the other the decedents.
Some of the victims related to the suspect. Police say the investigation is ongoing. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Experience the Take Care difference. Take Care members can count on accessing a high-quality, credentialed network of on-island providers, including the convenient one-stop FHP Health Center and urgent care, access to an extensive off-island network of providers, and the island's largest offering of free fitness classes and health education programs. You can count on Take Care to deliver comprehensive, accredited insurance coverage and quality health care when and where you need it. Take Care. Our island, your health plan. Learn more at takecareasia.com.
Family Finance has been serving the people of Guam since 1959, and they'll continue to be there for you in the years to come. Whether you're looking to get a personal loan for that summer vacation or paying off those long overdue bills, Family Finance has got you covered. Apply for a personal loan from $1,000 up to $3,600 by calling Family Finance in Agutya at 475-4545, Upper Tumon at 647-5626, or in Dededo 633-4473. Family Finance, serving the people of Guam since 1959.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Thus saith the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution. It's one of the 10 parts of the Bill of Rights to the United States Constitution, the guarantees of liberty for all of us fortunate folks that live here on Guam. Citizen or non-citizen, the liberty extends to all, and as per yesterday's exciting episode of Tall Tales, liberty ordinarily is not something the government does for you. It's something the government does not do to you. And we know that under our system of government, the government shall not take your life, liberty, or property without due process of law. We could spend a lot of tall tales talking about what is and what is not due process of law, but I think there's probably a pretty general understanding that the phrase shall not deprive a person of his liberty without due process of law bars any arbitrary or capricious restriction on a person's freedom. So we spent a lot of time on that yesterday, dealing with the absolutely ridiculous Sunday Forum piece in Sunday's Daily News. I don't have anything dramatic for you on the Second Amendment today, so I think what we'll do is we'll go straight to Zemi Ikotny. Zemi Ikotny done the real Joe Cruz. Nej, elect see real Joe Cruz. Zemi Ikotny done meet the press Pareo y dos, huh? Real Joe Cruz?
Ungan.
Gos Tongo Finner tomorrow we see real Joe Cruz.
Ungan.
Okay, so this treatment of the Daily News editorial is going to be very brief. I have something good to say about their editorial. Here's the title of the editorial: Trump stonewalls Congress. Now, I'll give you 3 guesses as to where this editorial came from, and the first 2 guesses do not count. Real Joe Cruz, you want to try your hand on this?
Washington Post?
Try again, Real Joe Cruz. No, it wasn't the WAPO. It was USA Today.
Oh, okay.
USA Today, yeah. So the only kind thing I can say about the PDN so-called editorial today is at least it's not plagiarism, as was pointed out by a column in Guam in the Post last week by a former publisher of the Pacific Daily News, who is now a columnist for the Post, one Lee Weber, who provided us with conclusive proof that something that had run in the Daily News as an editorial was actually something cobbed off from USA Today with no attribution to the USA Today whatsoever. It was run as though it were a local product. And Mr. Weber pointed out that back in his day, this was called plagiarism, and it could cost you your job. So I don't know, maybe they were listening, so now maybe they'll be more careful so that the 3 out of 7 editorials that they run, that they get from USA Today, are properly labeled as such. So, you know, they're not in the running for the Blue Star today, but at least they're not in the running for the dreaded P, which I will inscribe on any editorial that I find is plagiarism. So from there, we go to what I guess I ought to refer to as real editorials. That is the ones that run in the Post. Occasionally the Post will run something from the WAPO, but not very often. And when they do, they identify it for what it actually is. They don't try to slip one by on gullible talk show hosts like me and my faithful companion, the real Joe Cruz. Okay, so here's the Post for today. Release of repeat burglars, robbers, thieves must stop. Once again, a property owner was victimized by burglars and thieves. Well, I'm going to have to be a little critical here. All burglars, well, no, I was going to say all burglars are thieves, but that isn't true. The crime of burglary means the unprivileged entry into the dwelling of another with the intent to commit a felony once inside. The statutory definition of burglary has been broadened, so it goes beyond just the dwelling of another. It could be the business of another, or the storage shed of another, or the car of another, etc. But I was going to say that all burglars are thieves, but not necessarily. All burglars are not necessarily thieves, and all thieves are certainly not burglars. Once again, a property owner was victimized by burglars and thieves who would rather take items of value owned by others than put in hard work and save up to be able to buy something or pay for something they want. Okay, I had to stop. I saw the T word, they, there, and I had to stop and figure out what they were really talking about. They were actually talking about burglars and thieves. It wasn't reference to a single person, the sex of whom was definitely known by the writer, but in deference to the concept of political correctness, a third-person singular, he or she, could never be used. You have to use they. This time, a business in the Harmon Industrial Park was the target. On Sunday morning before daybreak. Now, once again, on Sunday morning before daybreak. Okay. Couldn't we have just said before daybreak Sunday? Yeah, because daybreak only happens in the morning. It never happens at night. Okay, so it could have read then. On Sunday before daybreak, video footage shows 2 males casually opening the gate to the business's compound, breaking the lock to the business, and taking 2 all-terrain vehicles valued at a few $1,000s. These perpetrators even had a flatbed truck waiting for their heist, and the truck also had been stolen. Well, it's nothing like planning ahead, I guess, even for burglars. There have been instances over the past few weeks and months when people have been caught on surveillance, breaking into cars and going through parking lots to see which vehicles aren't locked in order to steal stuff. It can get really frustrating for property owners to be violated by people who disregard the law and take items that aren't theirs. In some of the past break-ins, robberies or thefts or a combination of these crimes, we've seen repeat offenders or suspects. We've seen some of these suspects captured and sent to jail or prison, and the next time we hear about them, they've been arrested again. Guam police officers work hard to follow the crime trail and catch suspects, only to see them freed and then be sought after or caught again for a similar crime. This revolving door needs to stop at the judiciary of Guam. We also need the Attorney General's office to vigorously fight against the release of repeat burglars, thieves, and robbers. And if part of the problem is a lack of strength or loopholes in our laws, then lawmakers must prioritize fixing these issues instead of focusing on less important matters like legalizing marijuana. I just added that for emphasis there. Such as establishing gambling rules for a pop-up casino, legalizing recreational weed, or stacking up additional benefits for government of Guam workers. Most people will become victims of these criminals if our law enforcers do not get the support they need from tougher judges, proactive prosecutors, and responsive lawmakers. So that's the Post editorial. Without further ado, since the Daily News is forfeited again, I have awarded the coveted Blue Star to the Post. I'm going to come back and analyze and comment a little bit, but I've got a call here from Dean. From the Dean. I don't know, Dean of what college, Dean?
Well, sir, the college Dean of Sir Klitzkie. How are you doing this afternoon, sir?
Real good, Dean. So are you the Dean of Tall Tales, perhaps?
Well, once upon a time.
Okay.
Anyways, I hope you don't mind switching topic. Nepotism. I'm not clear in regards to the true meaning of nepotism in the workplace. Can you elaborate a little bit more?
Yeah. What nepotism refers to is having people who are related by blood or marriage in close proximity on the job, especially in a supervisor-supervisee relationship.
Okay. Now, here's my understanding. An example, like the general manager of Waterworks, whose godfather and brother-in-law are sitting on the board. Would that constitute nepotism, or if not nepotism, maybe a conflict?
Well, for godfather, no, because that's not a blood. It's not a blood relative or a relationship of blood or marriage.
Okay.
Now, brother-in-law, you say his brother-in-law is sitting on the board?
Yes.
In other words, his wife's brother is sitting on the board?
No, wife, sister's husband.
Wife's sister's husband. I don't think that makes. I don't think that's a brother-in-law then. Brother-in-law would be your wife's. If you're a man, excuse me.
Okay.
If they, boy, this gets complicated now, doesn't it? I used to know. I could easily tell you what a brother-in-law was, but nowadays with all of this gender confusion, it's gotten much harder. But let's say a man's sister, as you were a man's wife's, a man's wife had a brother. That would be his brother-in-law. If she had a sister, that would be his sister-in-law.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we don't really reach the question of in-laws under the facts you describe.
Okay.
Okay.
So there will be no conflict of interest either.
Well, probably not, unless there's more to the relationship than some loose. There's a really good term to define what the relationship you describe. I don't titongo na after manamashangin gifinu tomorrow, but in English it's shirt-tail relative. A shirt-tail relative is someone who you can trace some relationships by blood or marriage, but it doesn't come within the husband, wife, brother, sister, aunt, uncle, grandfather, grandmother, grandson, grandchild. Shirt-tail relative. So if it's merely a shirt-tail relative, I suspect not.
Okay. Earlier this afternoon, I had I was having a conversation with my son and my nephew, and the things they talk about sort of a little bit disturbed me, especially when in regards to how you call it, teenage sex and what do you call it on the phone? Sexting? Is that what it's called?
On the phone?
Yeah, where they take images of, for example.
Sexting. Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so how it is. A teenage girl would take a selfie, but over private parts, and starts, I guess, what do you call it? Putting it out there, from phone to phone, how you call it. And when supposedly they had sent it to my nephew, and my nephew sent it to my son, I said, no. You need to delete those. You need to delete that, because that's considered wouldn't that be considered like a crime?
Well, if any of the people in those images are minors, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Trust me, they are considered minors. So, they're still in school. And
bad news. Bad news.
And one more thing before I let you go, sir.
Well, you got here just in time, didn't you?
Yes. In regards to DOC, I know that there are times when an inmate or an individual would turn himself over the weekend and be released again later on Sunday evening or whatever the case may be. Rather than being on the dime of the government on the weekend, I would propose maybe putting an ankle and instead of turning himself at least house arrest. Rather than on a week after week basis, depending on how long the term is, rather than being on the dime of the government, just put house arrest. I would think that would be the same thing, really.
Same thing as what?
As turning yourself in and just spending the weekend, at DOC. That's house arrest,
I don't quite understand.
An individual is, doing whatever he needs to do on the weekdays.
Yeah.
Come Friday evening, he turns himself into DOC. Then he's let go again at, let's say, 6 o'clock in Sunday evening to go back out and do whatever he needs to do, whether it be working or whatnot. And, and this is like a weekly thing. Every week, he has to turn himself until the judgment is cleared.
Well, I do remember one person who was sentenced to like 2 or 3 years to be spent on weekends as opposed consecutively. But I'll give you another idea. In Wisconsin, they have the concept of the Huber dorm, Huber, named after some state senator. Okay. And the way the Huber dorm works, it is exactly that. It's a dormitory, and people who live in the Huber dormitory go to work, and then they come back and they sleep in the dormitory, so they can go to and from work. Otherwise, they're in that dormitory, and they have to pay for their place in the dormitory and for the meals that they eat there. Pretty good system, wouldn't you say?
Oh yeah, it's almost like they're paying paying rent, and that I understand that concept there. That's a good concept.
Well,
They're under supervision, though, right?
Yeah, in that dormitory, they are under supervision. If they walk away from that dormitory without permission, it's an escape. And then they could wind up in the Crossbar Hotel.
That sounds like a good concept if we should they implement that here.
Now that there's so much attention paid to the criminal justice system, we might be able to get something like that.
Yeah, and rather than the government, being on the government's dime, they in turn pay the government back by their room and board at the the dormitory.
Yeah,
that does make sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, anyway, sir, thank you so much for the information, and have a good afternoon.
Well, thank you for calling, Dean. And by the power vested in me as the host of Tall Tales, I am hereby designating you the Dean of Question College. Congratulations, Dean. Thanks for calling. Okay, I got a couple posts here on the christening relationship, or as we say in Guam, the christening relationship. Where is it here? A godfather can be a blood relative. That is, my mom's brother is my godfather. Well, I would say you're correct, A, but I would reverse it. And I would say that a blood relative can be a godfather, right? But there's no requirement that a godfather be a blood relative. And being a godfather and nothing more does not make you a blood relative. So I'll stand by my original definition, and thank you for your gloss on the word too, A. So on that basis, I'm going to give you an A. A. All right. And then somebody chimes in, anything including a minor in the nude or regarding anything in a sexual manner is considered child pornography. Just by receiving those files is a crime. It's not something to horse around with, that's for sure. Hardly a month goes by that there isn't a story in the paper about a prosecution arising just from something like that. Nothing to horse around with. Okay, so the question here is crime then. And since Mr. Paul Santos Mafnes Jr. Came before the public's observation, there has been an awful lot of interest in crime and punishment. Now, you remember Mafnes was guilty of some serious crimes, was sentenced to 20-some years in jail or in prison, spent 17, was paroled, served 4 years on parole. His parole was cut short by 1 year. Maybe a year after that, he went out and did the same thing again, and apparently admitted to the cops that he couldn't help himself. He was addicted to kidnapping and raping young girls. So it's the old barn door, right? The old horse in the barn door. Once the horse gets away, the next sound you hear is the rancher slamming that barn door shut over and over again, padlocking it, double locking it, etc. But the horse is already gone. So we had several senators come along and introduce some tough-on-crime bills in the wake of the Mafnes incident. And of course, we do have as part of our liberty, we have a prohibition against ex post facto laws. That is, that something cannot be made a criminal offense after the act has occurred. The criminal law has to be in place before the act occurs in order for a prosecution to lie on that particular act. So none of these tough on crime bills are going to affect Mr. Mafnes. But they don't stop us from asking, well, what can we do in the future? And there are lots of things we could do, and I suppose the popular sentiment would be, Let's just do away with parole. Let's get rid of the parole board. No more parole. If a person is sentenced to 20 years, he does 20 years and that's it. Now, the other day I commented that although this appeals to a certain sense of vengeance, if nothing else, unless a person is doing life imprisonment without parole, everybody that we sentence to prison is going to get out someday. And our desire would be when that person gets out of prison that he commit no more crimes. And I think probably if you look at the research, there's a good case to be made that people who undergo some sort of a re-entry program into society have much less chance of reoffending than someone who finishes his term, is given a clean set of clothes and shown to the door and away he goes to figure things out for himself. So I'll come back to this. Real Joe Cruz is playing my favorite song right now, so I got to take a short break and I'll be right back.
Docomo Pacific's all-new business bundles provide tailored solutions to help your business become a better business. Choose from our business basic, essential, or value bundles and get unlimited talk and text, worry-free data at home and abroad, plus access to the fastest online speeds in the Marianas. Add on mobile or broadband lines and save up to 20% for each line. Email businesssales@docomopacific.com to find out which bundle provides the best solution for your business. Terms and conditions apply.
Let's go for a drive.
Let's take a stroll. Let's gallivant. Let's go cruising.
We all have different ways to describe how we get up and go in our cars. But whatever you may call it, you can do more of it when you save 6% off your fuel purchases at any Shell station when you use your eligible Bank of Guam Visa and MasterCard credit cards. So stop by any Guam or CNMI Shell station and start saving today. Visit bankofguam.com for more information. Terms and conditions apply. Bank of Guam, the People's Bank. Member FDIC.
Welcome back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, Guam's single voice of reason. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
So the thinking is that by having a parole provision where someone is kind of eased back into society, his chances of reoffending diminish. As an example, at our prison, emerging inmates are given some help in getting a driver's license, finding a place to live, maybe even finding a job, etc., instead of just tossing them out on their ear after several years in prison when they're very poorly equipped to survive in the outside world. So I think doing away with parole would not be a good idea. Under our parole system, as originally designed, and I've covered this before, a minimum of 2/3 of a sentence was to be spent inside, no more than 1/3 on the outside. So every sentence was actually a combination of two things, prison time and parole. The length of each was to be governed by the informed discretion of the parole board. Someone who seemed to have done well in prison, was on the road to rehabilitation, could have perhaps been paroled after serving 2/3 of his sentence. We changed that so that a certain group of offenses, the minimum was 85% of the sentence, and I think that was Mr. Paul Santos Smofness Jr., and then he went on parole. Also, if an inmate is sentenced to 20 years in prison and he's not paroled, he finishes his 20 years, he's still got 3 years of parole ahead of him before he's completely free. So parole is defensible. And going back to the dean of the college's question here about, people being allowed to spend some of their time at home and some of their time in prison, there is a concept called intense supervision, which is a little bit more manpower intensive than what we have. You need more parole officers. But people would spend a lot more time outside the walls than inside. So as an example, you could have a situation where a person does some time inside, and then he is, instead of sentenced to being inside the walls, he's sentenced to live at his own house, pay his own medical expenses, pay for his own food, and he never leaves his house unless he's accompanied by a corrections officer to take him to the doctor, to the dentist, to a radio shop to buy a good FM radio so he can listen to tall tales. Only essential things like that. Otherwise, he's at home. This obviously cuts down on prison overcrowding, is much more economical than keeping someone inside the bars, and would facilitate that person's reentry into society. So just hypothetically, let's say a person spends 3 years in the prison, and then he spends the next 2 years of his intense supervision confined to his own house, except as I described. And then the next step is he gets a job, and he gets to go to his job and come home, etc. And if he does well on that, then the next thing is, well, let's give him Saturday afternoons at liberty, etc., and continue to increase the prisoner's freedom as he shows that as they show that they can handle it. It's called intense supervision. Something I think we should investigate, along with the Huber dorm, or as Brad Hewitt pointed out, Texas has a similar program. Of course, in Texas, the dorm is 4 times bigger than in any of the other states, because we all know that everything in Texas is bigger, right? So I would suspect something like that, might shed some light on where we are as far as incarceration of people, and making sure that we don't turn dangerous people loose on the public. I also want to get into pretrial release, which is a subject of great criticism in the press. We were like Mayor Paul McDonald had his car stolen. They caught the thieves. The cops caught him. They let him go, and the guys went out and committed some more crimes. They never saw the inside of a cell at either DYA or the prison. So I want to talk about that a little bit, but I'm going to cruise through the Facebook comments here. I think I've got some comments on what I'm talking about here, and then I'll come back to that. James Limtiaco is still stuck on liberty. I'll come back to that later on. And James Howard wants to talk about waterboarding in a foreign country and liberty. You gotta be a little bit more explicit with your question, James Howard. I like to answer questions, but as per the Daily News, if I have to write the question myself, it makes it a little less fun for me to answer the question. So maybe you could work on your question a little bit, James, and I would be more than happy to answer it. Now, I guess the only one I got here is from Brad Hewitt, and this is I'll read what Brad says. Texas has a dorm environment, also workers program, mostly for low-level offenders who have jobs. They pay their stay, child support, fines, restitution, etc. Miss your bed check, and the court and the county sheriff sends marshals looking for you. This program, the offenders get to keep their jobs. Usually they are given 3 days credit for every day served. Most of these guys end up on short probation and never offend again. Yeah, I think that's a really a good idea, because one of the things that happens to people once they're inside prison is a process that I call prisonization. Being in prison, like anything else, requires a certain amount of skill. And some people get very good at being inmates. They know how to work the system, make the system work for them. They know how to influence the behavior of others in the prison environment to their advantage. So if you stop to think about it, out in Manila, we have the largest institute of higher education for con men anywhere in this part of the world. So many of the folks out there don't really have much to occupy their time except figuring out how to be really good at conning other people. So let's say you take someone who commits an offense like DWI with injuries. He doesn't have that criminal state of mind. He just did something really stupid and winds up in prison for 3 years and figures, I'm just going to go out there and do my time, keep my mouth shut, be good, get out, and try to get my life back. Well, the lifers in that prison won't allow that to happen. They will do everything that they can to bend that person to their will, so that by the time that guy gets out, given the fact that there are all kinds of influences tending to turn him into something that he wasn't when he came in, he is prisonized. He knows how to live in a prison environment and how to get by. And so many of those skills that come with prisonization are counterproductive in the outside world. So if we had that Huber dorm type system, we could avoid that for minor offenders who really didn't have that criminal state of mind, who might, if they were actually thrown inside the walls for a significant period of time, maybe they didn't have the criminal state of mind when they went in, but they might very well have it when they get out. So I think that's certainly worth exploring. Let's talk a little bit about pretrial release. And again, I have to go through a little drill that I've been through before. There are, I think, 3 ways that a person can find himself in confinement. That is, with his liberty extremely restricted. One way would be to go to trial, trial to the court or jury trial, be found guilty, and be sentenced to prison. That gets you into prison, right? A second way would be to be brought before a magistrate on a magistrate's complaint. The magistrate finds that there's probable cause to think that you have, or to conclude that you have committed a crime, and that there's not a good reason for you to be released pending trial. Away you go to jail. No jury, no trial, no innocent until proven guilty. You're in the pokey. The third way to get to jail is to do something that a police officer observes, decides that he has probable cause to arrest you because it's more likely than not that a crime was committed and that you committed that crime. He slaps the cuffs on you and, as per law and order, tells you have a right to remain silent, etc. The cop fills out some papers, turns you into the detention facility, and there you will sit until you are brought before a magistrate, maybe 2 days later. But you're still in jail during that particular period of time. So that cop out on the beat has more power to restrict your liberty than the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. All he's got to do is take you into custody and fill out some papers, and you're gone. So the part that I want to talk about a little bit is when you are brought before a magistrate. Now, our law says that a person in custody must be brought before a magistrate no later than 48 hours after his arrest. And then his incarceration is governed by Chapter 40 of 8 GCA, if you want to follow along at home. And 4010 says, At his first appearance before a judge, every person charged with an offense shall be ordered released pending trial in the manner and subject to the conditions provided by 40.15 and 40.20. Shall be released. And then some conditions. Okay, and then 40.15. A, as used in this section, release on recognizance means release of the person charged without bail and upon his written agreement to appear in court at all required times and places and to fully comply with any other court order, conditions, and restrictions. B, the judge shall order the person charged to be released on recognizance. So the preference is for release on recognizance, unless the judge determines in his discretion. Now, we got to revise the code here because it says in his discretion. What it should say, unless the judge decides in their discretion. Right, Real Joe Cruz? Yeah, boy, so politically incorrect. And it's in the law book, too. I wonder who's responsible for this language. Unless the judge determines in his discretion on the basis of available information that such a release will not reasonably assure the appearance of the person as required or will endanger the safety of any other person or the community. C, in determining whether there is a substantial risk of non-appearance by the person charged or that the person charged will endanger the safety of any other person in the community, the judge shall consider the following factors. 1, the nature of the offense and the apparent possibility of conviction and the likely sentence. 2, history and characteristics of the person charged. 3, the nature and seriousness of the danger the person would pose to the community or any other individual member thereof if released, etc. So you can see there are conditions, but the preference of the statute, you start out with the idea that anybody brought before a magistrate after an arrest, you start out with the proposition that he should be released on his own recognizance, unless the judge decides after going through this laundry list not to let him out. Now, if we are convinced that we're running too much of a revolving door with arrestees, then the 15 folks that we have down at the legislature, is there any special characteristic of those 15 folks, Phil Joe Cruz?
10 females, sir.
10 of them are females?
Yes, sir.
Wow. Yeah. So that means only 5 of them are men, huh?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
You're good at math, sir.
Say again?
You're good at math.
Well, one thing that makes me really dangerous, Real Joe Cruz, is I'm not as dumb as I look. Pretty close, but not quite. All right. So if the 15 down there really want to get tough on this stuff, then they need to go through Chapter 40 of Title 8. And maybe they want to change it instead of saying, instead of saying the judge shall order the person charged to be released on recognizance, maybe a minor change. The judge may order, etc. But, this is the kind of thing, work that legislatures are supposed to be doing. They're supposed to be looking at the statutes in place, considering the current challenges that arise by the application of those statutes, and if there are problems, to fix the problems and not waste their time doing rules and regulations for gambling at the Liberation Day Carnival, which is exactly what they're doing right now, I think. So if we want to get tough on crime, we start out here, and then we go to Title 9 of the WOM Code annotated, and we go through all of the sentences, and we want to make sure that the sentences are as we want them to be for the particular crimes. And we re-examine the whole parole mechanism, perhaps consider such things as a Huber dorm, intense supervision, etc. Maybe we can bring about some changes there. Maybe not. Okay, so that's it for Semi-Cotney. I'm going to go to the card right after this break.
In illness and in wellness, Calvo's Select Care is health care that is there for you. That's why over 80% of the Guam medical community places their trust and insures with us. We offer our members wellness and fitness programs for a healthier lifestyle and provide a comprehensive medical network on and off island to help members from unexpected illnesses. Contact Calvo's Select Care today for more information.
Attention homeowners, MRE solar energy systems now come with battery storage for zero money down. This means that your home will have power even when the island power isn't available, like during power outages or during and after storms. The inconvenience of not having power for your home is a thing of the past. It's solar with battery storage exclusively by Micronesia Renewable Energy. Don't be left in the dark. Call 632-2613 for a free consultation. MRE, the smarter choice.
Okay, so basically I have yesterday's card because I spent so much time with that Sunday Daily News so-called editorial that I never even got to the card. So this is what I have on the card for today. California versus cannabis, Bordallo versus ill intent, Barnes versus the Guam Visitors Bureau, Bovacqua and Zinn versus the church, Noquette versus Torres, the mainstream media versus Christians, and cops versus Black Lives Matter. Now, as I've mentioned before, this program is highly structured, but you needn't dissuade that from calling and raising an issue that isn't in the card or even isn't what I'm talking about at the particular time. This is an interactive show, a radio talk show, an issue-oriented radio talk show host that invites guest participation. So if you have a burning question, such as the dean of the question college had, go ahead and give us a buzz. Call the real Joe Cruz. I'm going to give out the real Joe Cruz's phone number right now. Ready? It's 888-8275. And the dulcet tones that you will hear on the other end of the line when you call that number will be none other than the real Joe Cruz.
Let's talk.
Yeah, let's talk. Who is working really hard to continue to build up his cult of personality here on Tall Tales. Okay, so California versus cannabis. This is something that I took from the New York Times. Now, I am an eclectic reader. I read a lot of conservative stuff, websites, etc. I read the WAPO. I read the New York Times. I read Salon, Counterpunch. Did I say New York Times? Yeah. So this is what the New York Times article says. It's by Thomas Fuller. He says, getting worse, not better. Illegal pot market booming in California despite legislation. Yeah, it's right here. Right here. And this is California of all places. By the way, if you haven't seen it, I would recommend Murder Mountain on Netflix. It's a 6-episode series. If you like to talk about cannabis and or marijuana, this would give you something to talk about. So here's how the article goes. In the forests of Northern California, raids by law enforcement officials continue to uncover illicit marijuana farms. In Southern California, hundreds of illegal delivery services and pot dispensaries, some of them registered as churches, serve a steady stream of customers. And in Mendocino County, north of San Francisco, the sheriff's office recently raided an illegal cannabis production facility that was processing 500 pounds of marijuana a day. Yeah, how does this work with that? Well, you know, everybody's doing it already, so if we legalize it, then at least we can regulate it. I don't know. Going on, it's been a little more than a year since California legalized marijuana, the largest such experiment in the United States. But law enforcement officials say the unlicensed illegal market is still thriving and in some areas has even expanded. There's a lot of money to be made in the black market. Tom Allman is one of the Toms, sheriff of Mendocino County, whose deputies see cannabis farms instead. Step-up enforcement comes with a certain measure of irony. I like that. Eh? I like things that are ironic, if you haven't noticed. Legalization was meant to open a new chapter for the state, free from the legacy of heavy policing and incarceration for minor infractions. Instead, there are new calls for a crackdown on illegal selling. Well, that's pretty ironic. Conscious of the consequences that the war on drugs had on Black and Latino communities, cities like Los Angeles today say they are wary of using criminal enforcement measures to police the illegal market and are unsure how to navigate in this uncharted area. The only charted area, of course, is the identity politics that apparently Los Angeles officials are fully cognizant of. The struggles of the licensed pot market in California are distinct from this experience of other states that have legalized cannabis. Sales in Colorado, Oregon, and Washington grew well above 50% for each of the first 3 years of legalization, although Oregon now has a large glut of pot. No other state has an illegal market on the scale of California's, and those illicit sales are cannibalizing. Now that sounds like something I would have said. Cannibalizing the cannabis market. Cannibalizing the revenue of licensed businesses, in some cases, experts say, forcing them out of business. So the illegal guys are forcing the legal guys out of business. We are taxpayers. No one else should be operating, said Robert Taft, Jr., whose licensed cannabis business in Orange County has seen sales drop in recent months. This is starting to get ridiculous, he said. Okay, well, I'm going to come back to California versus cannabis right after that big halftime show. And I think we've probably got some interesting stuff on Facebook, so I'll probably gaze at that before we get into the next item on the calendar, which is Bordallo versus Ill Intent.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
The feds say it's a terror plot foiled. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. A former Army soldier arrested taking delivery of what he thought was a bomb that he allegedly planned to use in an attack on a white supremacist group in Southern California.
The complaint charges Mark Stephen Domingo, a 26-year-old resident of Reseda, with a felony offense of providing and attempting to provide material support to terrorists.
That's federal prosecutor Nick Hanna, who says Domingo converted to Islam and wanted retribution for the New Zealand mosque attacks. He had served 4 months with the U.S. Army in Afghanistan. The Trump family is going to court to try and stop some congressional subpoenas.
President Trump, members of his family, and his private businesses have filed a federal lawsuit in the Southern District of New York against Deutsche Bank and Capital One Bank in an attempt to block the banks from complying with congressional subpoenas. President Trump is refusing to sit back and take what he describes as presidential harassment, though Democrats describe it as them simply doing their job of congressional oversight.
Fox's Kristen Fisher. Another showdown with Congress may be brewing. Attorney General William Barr is scheduled to testify before the House Judiciary Committee the day after tomorrow, but he may decline to appear after committee chairman Congressman Jerry Nadler said he'd permit the committee's staff attorneys, not just members of the committee, to question the Attorney General about the Mueller investigation. Chairman Nadler says if the Attorney General fails to appear, they'll issue a subpoena. Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein has submitted a letter of resignation to President Trump. Again, this one effective at the end of next week. Rosenstein intended to leave in mid-March, but stayed on a little longer for the completion of the special counsel Robert Mueller's Russia investigation. Asian stocks closing Tuesday mixed. Dow futures are down about 10 points. This is Fox News.
Hey, it's Mom. Somebody forgot to thaw the chicken, so meet us at Chili's for 2 for $25. Oh, and congratulate your sister for making the basketball team. She's thrilled. Love you. See you at Chili's.
Enjoy 2 full meal combos for $25. An appetizer, 2 mouth-watering entrees like our crispy chicken breast, smoked barbecue quarter leg, or smoked jalapeno cheddar sausage. Served with corn on the cob and french fries. 2 bold combos for $25. A full-on meal deal available nightly for a limited time. Together, we Chili's.
Docomo Pacific's all-new business bundles provide tailored solutions to help your business become a better business. Choose from our Business Basic, Essential, or Value bundles and get unlimited talk and text, worry-free data at home and abroad, plus access to the fastest online speeds in the Marianas. Add on mobile or broadband lines and save up to 20% for each line. Email businesssales@docomopacific.com to find out which bundle provides the best solution for your business. Terms and conditions apply.
President Trump and top congressional leaders will meet today to discuss ways to rebuild the country's roads and bridges.
Ahead of a meeting on infrastructure today with President Trump, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer are outlining goals for a massive investment.
It would be extraordinarily unfair to ask the middle class to shoulder the cost of an infrastructure bill.
White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders says President Trump shares a passion for infrastructure upgrades.
It's vital for our country to repair our bridges, our roads, our airports, as well as our technology infrastructure.
But differences remain over how to pay for it and how to build climate-resilient structures. On Capitol Hill, Jared Halpern, Fox News.
The president wants changes to the country's asylum system, and he's giving the Justice Department and the Department of Homeland Security 90 days to come up with the new plans, which would require, among other things, a decision on most asylum cases within 180 days and charge a fee to asylum seekers. Hollywood is mourning the passing of a groundbreaking Oscar-nominated director.
John Singleton was beloved by Hollywood not just for being a great director, but for how he changed the cultural landscape of filmmaking. Many took to social media to express their grief and heap praise on Singleton, who made his debut in 1991 with Boys in the Hood. The Directors Guild president, Thomas Schlam, wrote, John didn't just make a film. He, quote, exploded into Hollywood, our culture, and our consciousness with such a powerful cinematic depiction of life in the inner city. Regina King posted, rest in power, my friend, one of the greatest to ever do it. While writer and director Jordan Peele wrote, John was a brave artist and a true inspiration. His vision changed everything. Michelle Polino, Fox News.
Singleton had suffered a stroke nearly 2 weeks ago. He passed late Monday after his family chose to remove life support. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Here
Here at APL, our core values give the company its heart and soul. Whether it's connecting your business with our global network through our newly enhanced service or investing our efforts into giving back to the community, APL is committed to serving you. We humbly honor the opportunity to find innovative solutions for you and your business. To learn more about our enhanced service, call 588-4651 or visit www.apl.com/Guam for more details.
Let's go for a drive.
Let's take a stroll. Let's gallivant.
Let's go cruising.
We all have different ways to describe how we get up and go in our cars. But whatever you may call it, you can do more of it when you save 6% off your fuel purchases at any Shell station when you use your eligible Bank of Guam Visa and MasterCard credit cards. So stop by any Guam or CNMI Shell station and start saving today. Visit bankofguam.com for more information. Terms and conditions apply. Bank of Guam, the People's Bank. Member FDIC.
Chris, I know you really enjoy that halftime show that we have every day at 1700. I don't think you miss very often, do you?
I almost never miss, Bob, and you would be amazed how it sounds on hold.
Yeah, I'll bet it's even better on hold than it is through those high-tech speakers that you have in your office, huh?
And that too, but on hold it's much nicer because it means I get to talk to you. Once again, you've hooked me into a pithy comment, and I thought I'm supposed to be the fisherman here.
Okay, go for it, Chris.
You know, in California versus cannabis, as you may know, I have been an opponent of this proposal that narrowly passed over a month ago. And one of the hard sells jobs from the proponents was exactly the points that you made that are seemingly in other jurisdictions not coming to fruition. One of the most hard sell items was regulation of illicit market. That was this won't be in order, but it certainly was in the top three. The other one was tax revenue. The third one was crime reduction. And from what I've seen, heard, read, and studied so far, Colorado and other jurisdictions are now starting to see the ill effects of this policy, and that none of these hard sell items are actually panning out to be true. To close on this pithy comment, I had a friend of mine that I was having breakfast with last month that said, Chris, you know, in my home, I have 6 adults of age. As I read, the policy has passed, allowing me between 5 and 6 mature plants. That would be 30 to 36 plants that I could just buy myself a 20-foot container and grow. The government would be hard-pressed to get any revenue from me, my family, or friends in taxation, because that would be like telling me to my tomatoes at the supermarket when I could grow them at my house.
Good points, Chris.
I just, to close, I was told by a medical professional friend of mine that there is a certain coffee shop that is now selling brownies with the cannabis derivatives. What bothers me about that is there are so many companies that have policies the government of Guam hasn't even developed its drug testing policy on cannabis. As well as we know, I don't think the military or the armed forces, even if the federal government were to deschedule the substance, would ever allow for any positive tests of that type of drug going forward. The biggest thing that I was upset about was to use one of your famous terms, alacrity at which this policy was ramroded down the people's throat. And I'm very concerned, and I almost don't want to be right about what I think this overarching policy has to our community. I want to be wrong, but it scares me.
I understand, Chris. To add to your fears, I heard on the radio the other day that a huge percentage of kids in 4th grade are vaping nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
That vaping has taken the youth by storm. And of course, it's possible to load a cannabis load into a vaping instrument. And you couple that with what I'm going to refer to as the cheerleader effect, and the results can be really serious. When I say the cheerleader effect, what I mean is it's kind of like Cheech and Chong were cheerleaders for marijuana, if you can remember that back that far.
I do.
Yeah, they were cheerleaders for marijuana. So, they developed a certain fan group. Oh, yeah, Cheech and Chong are cool because, they'll go out and smoke a joint at the concert. Well, the population of cheerleaders has dramatically increased now that marijuana has taken on an aura of legitimacy. And you find people that have large audiences now being cheerleaders for marijuana or cannabis. And the way kids work, the way a young person's mind works, I know, because believe it or not, Chris, I know you'll find this is really a tough one, but I was a kid once myself.
I believe that.
Really? Yeah, well, that just goes to my power of persuasion, not your sense of reality. But, I remember when I was a teenager, we'd go to the movies, and you'd see Humphrey Bogart with a cigarette hanging out of the corner of his mouth, bogarting it, as it were. And we thought, man, that's really cool. And all the really cool guys smoke cigarettes. And the Marlboro man with a tattoo on the back of his hand, riding his horse around, the essence of cool masculinity. So, you knew you weren't supposed to smoke when you were a teenager, but the incentives and the persuasion were very, very powerful. So, although at least in theory, the cheerleading was supposed to be for adults, it probably had more effect on children than it ever did on adults. And that's where we are now with cannabis, where we have cheerleaders for marijuana in public life, people that have audiences and voices. And we have the coolness of the vaping pipe and the possibility that really young people could be vaping marijuana. And some pretty solid research that shows that the brain housing groups of people aren't fully matured until somewhere after their 21st birthday. So when you got 14, 15, 16-year-old kids being impressed by the marijuana cheerleaders and the newfound quasi-legitimacy of the drug, coupled with the impairment of the brains of young people, I don't see what the rush was. I can't understand it.
I don't either. And although I'm middle-aged with reference to you, and that is certainly not your seasonedness and your age is something I've appreciated because you've counseled me over the past. But I do remember the Marlboro Man at cinema theaters and half-a-day theaters when I was a younger man myself. And I also do remember, I'm not going to say this is cause and effect, but I did, as probably a rebellious teenager, take up smoking, and thank God I quit right around my age of 25. I wanted to close this comment with this because I know that the hardest argument, and probably Facebook comments will show this, that the comparison to alcohol, which was like probably the top of the four hard sells, comparison to alcohol, comparison to other, activities within our community. Having been the director of Department of Youth Affairs for 6.5 years and watching parents come through and cry before me on how they could get counseling for their kids and try to turn their lives around, one thing they always said to me, not only smoking, but other situations that they found their kids in, was, please don't let this community put one more thing in front of my kids that's going to give me a harder time to do what I need to do, just trying to get them to adulthood. And that's always been my argument. Yes, you can compare it to alcohol. Yes, you can compare, statistics. How does that go? There's lives, damn lives, and then there's statistics. You can go down the road with all that. But the fundamental argument is, did we need one more thing that is readily available to put us at a disadvantage to trying to help our children?
I kind of echo your sentiments on that one. Yeah, my phrase after going through some of the legalities and the federalism concept was, I'm just not convinced that we need another mind-altering drug in our community. Kind of the same thing.
More, Senator.
Thanks a lot for calling, Chris.
Have a great day.
Thank you, sir. So I'm going to go back into this article, and then I'll pick up some of the Facebook comments. I expect to probably see the Triple J Rangers taking some offense to the remarks of former Senator Duenas, but after all, that's what Tall Tales is all about. We solicit the comments of our international radio listening audience here. If you would like to hear the dulcet tones of your own voice echoing through the chambers of international radiodom, 888-8255. Not only will you get a chance to have your voice heard throughout our international radio listening audience, you will also be able to have a personal chat with the legendary Real Joe Cruz. An added no-cost benefit. Yeah. So anyhow, Robert Taft Jr. says, this is starting to get ridiculous. Illegal pot shops, including nearby businesses that list themselves as churches and advertise marijuana as a kind of sacrament. It's almost like the state is setting itself up to lose. Well, hey, Robert Taft Jr., what's the name of the state again? Isn't it California? No surprise. Going on with this article, the fundamental reason for the strength of the black market in California is the huge surplus of pot. Since medical marijuana was made legal in California more than 2 decades ago, the cannabis industry flourished with minimal oversight. Now many cannabis businesses are reluctant to go through the cumbersome and costly process to obtain licenses that became mandatory last year. Now, doesn't that kind of tie in with the argument that I've heard right here on Tall Tales? Well, everybody's doing it anyhow, so we might as well make it legal and tax it. Everybody's doing it anyhow. Of the roughly 14 million pounds of marijuana grown in California annually, only a fraction, less than 20%, according to state estimates and a private research firm, is consumed in California. The rest seeps out across the country illicitly through the mail, express delivery services, private vehicles, and small aircraft that ply trafficking routes that have existed for decades. Once again, Murder Mountain. And this goes back to one of the maxims that I learned from my Aunt Florence a long, long time ago. Aunt Florence would say when she would see people winding up with a fuzzy end of the lollipop, Aunt Florence would say, you can't expect to find an honest partner in a dishonest deal. The illicit trade has been strengthened by increasing popularity of vaping, cannabis-infused candles, tinctures, and other derivative products. Vape cartridges are much easier to carry and conceal than bags of raw cannabis, and the monetary incentives of trafficking also remain powerful. The price of cannabis products in places like Illinois, New York, or Connecticut are typically many times higher than California. The state's illicit cannabis exports appear to be increasing even now, well into California's second year of legalization. New Frontier Data, a research company that specializes in cannabis, calculates that high demand and more advanced growing techniques will contribute to approximately 500,000 pounds more illicit cannabis this year compared to 2018. Going back into the article, in wildland areas, seizures of illicit pot by the California Department of Fish and Wildlife more than doubled in 2018, the first year that recreational cannabis was legal. The department destroyed 1.6 million marijuana plants last year, up from 700,000 in 2017. There is a subset of people who are just refusing to get into the process, said Nathaniel Arnold, the department's deputy chief of enforcement. The Bureau of Cannabis Control, the agency charged with regulating marijuana, has received around 7,500 complaints, most of them about illegal operations, and has sent out more than 3,000 letters ordering legal businesses to shut down. It's only a matter of time before we start making a dent in the illegal market, a spokesman for the agency said, who acknowledged there were probably more illegal shops in Los Angeles alone than the licensed shops in the entire state. Now, next comes a statement from the executive director of the Department of Cannabis Regulation in Los Angeles, who said that even when illicit businesses were shut down, they often soon reappeared. Now, here's this guy's name, and I didn't make this up. His last name is Packer. You know, like Green Bay Packer. His first name is Cat. You know, those feline animals that go meow. So his name is Cat Packer. Or is it Cat Packer? What a name. I'm sorry, it's a Ms. Ms. Cat Packer also said that the city was mindful that criminal enforcement in the past had disproportionately targeted people of color. Mr. Taft, the cannabis entrepreneur, has sent 450 complaints to the Bureau and is unapologetic about his calls for an aggressive approach to illegal shops, which he says is the only way that California's giant experiment will work. So, something that I'm going to keep an eye on for you, and I will bring information to your attention. But I think this article kind of sheds some light on the supposed Shangri-La that we'd all be living in as soon as Governor Leon Guerrero signed Clint's bill. It hasn't worked that way in California. And then just a parting shot here. When I found this one, there was another one in the New York Times adjacent to it from the same guy, Thomas Fuller. And this is the headline of the article, quote, "Dead skunk stench from marijuana farms outrages Californians." Mike Wondolowski often finds himself in the middle of it. He may be on a chaise longue in his patio at his computer in his house or tending, enjoying himself in the privacy of his own home, right? Or tending his orange and lemon trees in the garden when the powerful, nauseating stench descends on him. I'm going to call him Wando. It's a long Polish name and it's hard to pronounce. Wando lives a half-mile away from greenhouses that were originally built to grow daisies. Well, what a nice neighborhood, huh? And chrysanthemums, but now house thousands of marijuana plants, part of a blooming and pungent business seeking to cash in on recreational cannabis. Quote, "If someone is saying, 'Is it that bad?' I'll go find a bunch of skunks and every evening I'll put them outside your window," This is the beauty of the cannabis industry. It's just brutal. When Californians voted to legalize recreational marijuana in 2016, there were debates about driving under the influence and keeping it away from children. But lawmakers did not anticipate the uproar that would be generated by the funk of millions of flowering cannabis plants. As a result of the stench, residents in Sonoma County, north of San Francisco, are suing to ban cannabis operations from their neighborhoods. Mendocino County, farther north, recently created zones banning cannabis cultivation. The sheriff's deputy there says the stink is the #1 complaint. In Santa Barbara County, cannabis growers confronting the rage of neighbors are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars installing outdoor, odor control systems that were designed for garbage dumps. The smell from commercial cannabis farms, which brings to mind a mixture of rotten lemons and sulfur, is nothing like the wafting cloud that might hover over a fish show, pot farm detractors say. So if you are an entrepreneur, given the fact that Clint's bill is now law and we're, very close to farming marijuana here in Guam, it may very well be that you could get on the ground floor by developing these odor control systems. In fact, someone who gets into odor control systems at the beginning may make more money than the cannabis vendors. So much for California versus cannabis. It looks like California is getting beat in that one. Okay, I got a phone call here from our Carl. Good afternoon, our Carl.
Hey, Bob. Good afternoon. Enjoying listening to your show and looking at the comments online, listening to your calls. I just wanted to call and chime in. I had a recent conversation with a friend of mine who I was pretty much 99% sure he took marijuana sometimes, but I found out two very shocking or very surprising things in our conversation. First of all, I found out from him that he was not for legalization of marijuana, which really shocked me. And he said one of the reasons is that he's run a successful business for over 10 years, and he's done very well. It's a small business, but he does very well. But he said he looked into the costs if he was to go into it, because he was eyeing going into it. And when he added up all the costs for equipment and legal papers and all this stuff, it came to close to $1 million. So he just feels like it's possible that it was structured in this way to monopolize the market by people that have more money.
Or perhaps, Carl, or perhaps to protect the illegal market.
That could be possible, yeah.
Yeah, to make it so expensive to go into the legal business that no one would do it, leaving the illegal black market free to operate without competition. Yes, and because it's illegal
at much higher profit margin, because there's only so much in the market. And another thing I found out from him that I found very interesting is that he does not smoke marijuana, which really shocked me. And he said one reason is that it stinks. He said it's like if you go into someone's house that constantly smokes in their house, it smells of tobacco. It reeks of tobacco. And he said if you go into someone's house that smokes a lot of pot, it smells like pot, and it's pretty bad. He actually, and another concern of his was that the combustion byproducts, the smoke from smoking marijuana, like tobacco, results in damage to the lung lining. And so what he does is he prefers to heat up, I believe it's CBD oil, and he inhales the vapors. But he does not smoke marijuana, which really kind of shocked me. I learned some very interesting things from him. But I found those 2 points pretty fascinating to me, and I had no idea. I never would have guessed either of them.
Well, thank you for sharing, Carl. Let me get into the Facebook comments here. And as usual, I appreciate your call.
Sure, yeah. Thank you for giving me a few minutes to...
Okay.
Boy.
Okay, so we're going to go out on the missing persons part of Tall Tales next, sometimes formerly referred to as the seventh inning stretch. And then I'll come back with Facebook comments here.
Attention homeowners, if you don't have a solar energy system on your roof from Micronesia Renewable Energy, now is the time to get one. MRE solar energy systems now come with battery storage for zero money down. This means that your home will have power even when the island power isn't available, like during power outages or during and after storms. The inconvenience of not having power for your home is a thing of the past. Don't be left in the dark. Call 632-2613 for a free consultation. MRE, the smarter choice.
What have people been telling you for as long as you can remember? Things that have in some ways framed how you see yourself and what you have and haven't achieved? We all listen to those words and they make an impact. I'm Jerry Robertson. At 7:20 a.m. on The Ray Gibson Show, we're going to talk about the power of labeling.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
And once again, a complete search of Wrigley Field and environs did not turn up a trace of Jack Haddock. But we're going to continue to look. So that's the seventh inning stretch here on Tall Tales. 2 more innings, and the game will be over for another day. So let me get back into my Facebook comments here. There's so many of them, I kind of lost the screen coverage here, so I got to look at them in a different way. It might be a little bit more cumbersome, but let's see. I started out here with I started out James Howard, Half a Day Judge Bob, and TJ Rangers. That would be the Triple J Rangers, or perhaps the Tijuana Rangers, the TJ Rangers. And then I've got Jesse Lemtiaco. Only an amendment to the United States Constitution can give the people of Guam the right to vote. Let me try this one again. Only an amendment to the United States Constitution can give the people of Guam the right to vote. Earth-shattering. Wow. How many times have we been through that, Real Joe Cruz? You know?
Many, sir.
Yeah. I mean, it's just if one would read the United States Constitution before going off on tangents, there would be less opportunity to run off the rails, if I can mix metaphors there. Jesse goes on to say, I'm having a hard time with this here. There is no existing constitutional right requiring such vote. That's the Attorney General of Guam versus the United States. It's a Ninth Circuit case. I remember when the case was brought. I knew the lawyers who brought the case. I told them, guys, have fun, but if you're lucky, you won't get sanctioned. They didn't get sanctioned, but obviously they got the booby prize for bringing that particular case. So this is common knowledge what you're bringing up here, Jesse, and it's also one of the one of the notes in the Guam Code annotated, and that's probably where you got it. Then we go on to say, because he says, because Guam is an unincorporated territory having only the powers given it by Congress, it is in essence an instrumentality of the federal government. As such, the negative implications of the Commerce Clause of the Constitution do not apply to Guam. And cites Sakamoto versus duty-free shoppers, another Ninth Circuit case. Well, the Sakamoto case is one of those famous old cases on Guam. It's like Marbury versus Madison, or Dred Scott versus Sanford, or Brown versus Board of Education. People who are in the know about the territorial nature of Guam are very familiar with Sakamoto. But most people see Sakamoto as a real advantage for Guam, not a disadvantage, because it means that the Interstate Commerce Clause does not apply to Guam like it does in the 50 states. And I'll read the Interstate Commerce Clause again for clarification. I've been through this more than once, but repetition sometimes increases learning. Article 1, Section 8, the Congress shall have the power to do several things. Paragraph 3, to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states and with the Indian tribes. So that clause does not apply here. And because of that, the airport was able to take a particular step with respect to Sakamoto that an airport in California or Hawaii couldn't have. So that case is good news, Jesse. Now, I know you're putting it in there because you think you're scoring points with the court's language about instrumentality of the federal government. But anyhow, that's the way it goes. All right, then I've got Albert Eliason. I'll return your Semper Fi, Albert. James Howard, can we discuss waterboarding and the waterboarding foreign country liberty CIA case? If you would tell me what question you want me to answer, I'd be more than happy to answer it. And while we're doing it, I would also talk about President Obama's taking out an American citizen in a foreign country with a drone and the constitutionality of that. But I want to make sure I know what question you're asking. Otherwise, it's going to be like that liberty question that the Daily News asked on Sunday. A. Camacho, interesting. Yes, it is, A. And then we go on to my question yesterday regarding Section 2 of the 14th Amendment states that the right to vote shall not be abridged with the exception of those involved in rebellion or crime. I hear several candidates running for president calling for extending voting rights to convicts. I'm puzzled why the media interviewing these candidates doesn't bring this amendment to our Constitution to the candidates' attention and ask them if they intend to push for an amendment. This is my understanding here, Albert. The constitutional amendment wouldn't be necessary. And let me once again go to the book, right? And it says, Section 2, representatives shall be apportioned among the several states according to their respective numbers. That means number of people, counting the whole number of persons in each state, excluding Indians not taxed. But when the right to vote at any election for the choice of electors or representatives in Congress, the executive and judicial officers of a state, or the members of the legislature thereof, is denied to any male inhabitants of such, to any of the male inhabitants of such state being 21 years of age and citizens of the United States, or in any way abridged, except for participation in rebellion or other crime, the basis of representation therein shall be reduced in proportion which the number of such male citizens shall bear to the whole number of male citizens in such state. So what that means is this, that if a state would ban anybody who's 21 years old, a male 21 years old in a state, from voting unless the ban arises from a crime, conviction of a crime, or participation in a rebellion, that state's representation is reduced. So the number of representatives that a state gets in the House of Representatives depends on that state's population. And it's right around, if you did the numbers, it's right around 740,000 people per representative. So if in California, for instance, there were 740,000 people in prison, males in prison, California's representation in Congress would be reduced by 1 member. That's what this section says. But the Constitution doesn't say that this, the Constitution doesn't speak to whether or not a state has to permit a prisoner to vote. If a state wants to, fine. But if you read between the lines, what's going on here is this. If all the prisoners in every state could vote, which party do you think they'd vote for? What do you think, Real Joe Cruz?
The Cannabis Party, sir.
Yeah, they'd vote Democrat. So the more prisoners that vote, the more Democrat votes you could get. I don't think the numbers would ever add up to this point, but it could very well be that in a state, it would mean more members in Congress, more representatives in the House of Representatives for that state. In other words, a more powerful Democrat Party. I suspect that that's why Bernie is pushing this. Let's let everybody in prison vote. But it doesn't require a constitutional amendment, Albert. That provision relates only to the representation of a state in Congress, Electoral College, et cetera, et cetera. So it's another one of those interests that's promoted by a prohibition, not a grant. But I'm glad you raised the question. All right, let's see what else I got here. A. Camacho. The word crime in the amendment is too ambiguous and a Pandora's box for interpretation. But what do I know? You know a lot, eh? You're a regular member of the Tall Tales posse. You know a lot. And then we've got James Howard, who comes in with Tom. And we're kind of short on Toms here for the last couple of days. We haven't had a call from a Tom. I haven't seen any posts from a Tom. So other than James Howard's mention of Tom, that's it. And James Howard says that's called the PARI system, sir. Well, I think he's referring to nepotism, et cetera, et cetera. And we use the word PARI in a manner that leads to possible confusion. PARI being short for Campari, being the Chamorroization of the Spanish word compadre, meaning that two people share the christening of a child as their connection. So traditionally, you would look upon your compadre almost the way you'd look on your brother. So if you can help your compadre out, you help him out, etc. We've taken that and shortened it to PARI, and now we've used it to mean any time that employment decisions are made on other than non-merit factors. I guess so long as one understands that, no harm, no foul. Okay, going on here with A. Camacho, a godfather we talked about that already. Joe Cruz says, my nephew's cousin's sister's roommate hired his auntie. Well, that's definitely nepotism, right? A. Camacho, anything including an angle comes back on this child porn angle, and A is exactly right on that one. And then we have a Tom. Tom Van Engen says, half a day, Tall Tales. Sorry, I'm late to class again. Well, better late than never, especially for the Toms. Carl Borja Nelson, howdy, Bob. Real Joe Cruz. Yeah, Tall Tales Posse. Brad Hewitt talks about the Texas dormitory system, which I've mentioned is 3 times bigger than the dormitory system anywhere else. And then we've got Real Joe Cruz chiming in on the pornographic pictures and the electronic pornographic pictures. Shelley Gibson, last person I would want chasing on me would be Mr. Klitzkie, somebody like Jim Miles, pretty much any of our Pops buddies, meaning Shelley's dad, Bill Gibson. Brad Hewitt talks in terms of shock probation. There are some jurisdictions that will sentence someone to prison, and if the person does fairly well, they will put that person on what they call probation. I don't know how that works. And give that person a chance to work his way clear of his jail sentence, of his prison sentence. And let's see, what else have I got here? Shelley Gibson, hey, Mr. Klitzkie, I love your tree shaking. Well, good, I'll keep shaking trees. And then Tom Van Engen again, thanks for your reasonable and accurate explanation about parole. We try really hard, but can't tell the future all the time. I guess maybe I should let the parole board borrow my crystal ball, huh? Has my crystal ball been pretty accurate, Real Joe Cruz?
Yes, it has, sir, but I don't think you should just lend it out to anybody. It's, with great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah, good. Yeah, true enough, Real Joe. I'm always glad for your helpful counsel. And then we've got Brad Hewitt. There's a big difference between jail and prison. News media love to use the word prison for anyone arrested. This is incorrect. Jail is pretrial or short sentences. Prison is after sentence phase and usually over 6 months. Then there's probation and parole. On Guam, pretrial release is given to probation. This is incorrect also. That's why bail bonds are so important. Those bondsmen would be responsible for pretrial release, freeing up probation officers. Well, let me tell you how our system here works. We do have a chief probation officer in the courts who runs the probation division. And within the probation division is a section called pretrial services. And it's pretrial services that deal with people who have been arrested but not brought to trial. They're not on probation. And it's an administrative convenience that pretrial services is in the probation office. But you'll oftentimes hear or see the news media say, well, the probation department at the Superior Court said that no, it's not. Probation only arises after conviction. So if a person is convicted, and going with the common law, if the person is convicted of a crime that is less than a felony, then probation lies. More than a felony means incarceration in the Department of Corrections. A felony is any crime for which the sentence is 1 year and 1 day. Anything short of that, probably a misdemeanor or would be sentenced as a misdemeanor. And a person who is sentenced to a misdemeanor could be put on probation rather than being locked up. But in order to be paroled, a person has to be convicted of a crime, ordinarily a felony, and sent to the Department of Corrections. So probations are handled by the judges of the Superior Court, trial judges. Parole is handled by the parole board at the Department of Corrections. So we're coming up on the home stretch here. I'm going to finish up with Facebook comments and call it a day.
Helen Keller once said, "Blindness separates us from things, but deafness separates us from people." At Ross Hearing Aids, it's their mission to keep you connected to the moments and the people that matter most in your life. Hearing aid technology has never been better, so schedule your complimentary hearing consultation today. Call Ross Hearing Aids, 637-HEAR, 637-4327. You should hear what you're missing. How's your hearing?
So what's the deal? Are you still paying for the right to have your checking account at your bank? Well, at Bank Pacific, we think it's our privilege, not our right. That's why we offer My Green Free Checking, where your monthly maintenance checking fees are zero. That's zero. And it comes with a free Visa check card and monthly green e-statements. My Green Free Checking. Bank Pacific today. Because having you as our customer, that's our privilege.
Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Equal housing lender, member FDIC. Viva Bank Pacific.
So here we are in the home stretch. That means I've got a little over 8 minutes here to wrap up my digestion of the Facebook comments, and then we'll call it a day here on Tall Tales. So let me see, where did I leave off here? Yeah, I just talked about the difference between pretrial, as you were, pretrial detention, probation, and parole. Probation, when a judge puts an inmate, as you were a convict on probation, the terms of the probation are spelled out. What he must do, what he must not do. If it's parole, then the parole board does the same thing. For pretrial release, I went through Chapter 40 of Title 8, and there's a laundry list of things that are incorporated in the release documents for someone who is pending trial, and that's their rules of engagement. So pretrial release, it's the judge who grants the release. Probation, it's the sentencing judge. Inmates at the penitentiary, it's the parole board that comes up with those conditions. Okay, Brad says, immediate magistrate within hours of arrest would free up space, but keeping a judge on call may be difficult. Yeah, it would be difficult, but there's another alternative, and that's this, that a lot of jurisdictions have what is called station house bail. So, for instance, if you get busted for drunk and disorderly, there's a schedule, and the schedule says drunk and disorderly, $500. So you post the $500 with probably with the treasurer of Guam. You get a piece of paper, and you could get out and sign some papers, and you could get out. Station house bail. Wouldn't require appearance before a magistrate to be released between the time of arrest and the appearance before the magistrate. Another thing that we could look at as we do this comprehensive look at our criminal law. Brad goes on to say, Shelley Gibson, that would be great to examine what's on the books already and make those statutes better. Instead, we have posers who worry about plastic bags. And I got Pierre here wishing me a good afternoon. And Nate horning in with, where's James Howard? We're discussing pot. Yeah, did he miss the roll call? Brad Hewitt. There will be a huge underground marijuana market here in Guam. Why pay to follow the rules and pay taxes when there's more profit in the black market? And here's James Howard. Okay. James Howard, come on, guys. It's still Schedule 1, so it's a moot point. Nate horns in with, I like how they work the system. Open a church, non-taxable. Well, if you're doing an illegal operation, probably paying taxes is the least of your worries, Nate. Shelley Gibson, posers doubling as biochemist and economist. Brad Hewitt, businesses are losing money. California didn't receive half of the projected tax revenue when they went recreational. A. Camacho, exactly. It's it's going to blow up, black market. Joe Cruz, part of the Triple J Rangers, grow your own. Joe Cruz, I prefer my own tomatoes. You know, once in a while, when I'm really self-indulgent, I will sit in the privacy of my own home eating tomatoes that my neighbor grew. My neighbor can grow her own tomatoes. So I enjoy those in the privacy of my own home. Brad Hewitt wants to know, where was Chris during the public hearings? Joe Cruz has a rather uncomplimentary one-word comment. I don't know exactly what it addresses, but it's there. Nate horns in with, a lot of people don't want to garden. A. Camacho, I agree. James Howard, Guam is not California or Colorado. Chris and rumors are not credible sources for debate. Or, sir, debate, sir. Lanya, Senator. Well, okay. Now, I read something from the New York Times. I will leave it to my international radio listening audience to determine the credibility of the New York Times. I've occasionally taken shots at it myself. Joe Cruz, fear. Duenas is afraid. I don't vote for scared people. Okay. It's too bad I wonder if that means that if we could bring Chuck Norris out here.
That Joe Cruz sounds salty.
Yeah, he's kind of salty, but he says he doesn't vote for scared people. So if we brought Chuck Norris out here, he could be elected governor without even being a candidate.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'd vote for him.
Yeah, I'd vote for Chuck Norris. Yeah. Did you know that Chuck Norris's tears cure cancer?
I'm not surprised, sir.
Yeah, the only thing is Chuck Norris has never cried. Okay, A. Camacho, my sister in San Francisco concurs. Not to mention the crime she's mentioned. Home and dispensary invasions. Okay, well, once again, we've come to the end of another perfect day, or near perfect day, right here on Tall Tales with your ever-popular, humble host, me, ably supported by the technical whiz in the control room known as the real Joe Cruz.
Thank you very much.
We'll be back tomorrow.